If you've watched my videos before, then you already know nearly every great prophet has cast a dark shadow over the year 2025. But as we followed the clues left behind by these prophecies, another discovery emerged, one that made everything feel even more ominous. It was a forgotten prophecy from a Zen master who lived over 1,000 years ago, a man revered as one of the 7 greatest seers in the history of ancient China. His name was Huangbo Xiyun, and within an almost lost collection of classical poems, he left behind 14 prophetic verses. Astonishingly, 12 of those 14 have already come true. Only 2 remain, and one of them contains a prediction that speaks of a world-shifting event in the year 2025. So what exactly did this ancient monk foresee? Let's find out in today's story. So fasten your seatbelt as we dive into today's mystery. But first, you might just have incredible luck if you like and subscribe before this video ends. In Europe, the name Nostradamus is often invoked as the quintessential symbol of prophecy. But in the East, there exists a figure no less revered by later generations. A man remembered not only as a deeply enlightened monk, but also as a prophet whose visions transcended time itself. His name was Zen master Huangbo Xiyun. According to historical records, he lived during China's Tang Dynasty, more than 1,000 years ago. But Huangbo was not a mystic in the conventional sense. He did not travel from town to town delivering cryptic sermons or promising salvation to the masses. Instead, he withdrew from the world, dedicating his life to asceticism and deep meditation. He believed that only by letting go of worldly attachments could one truly grasp the essence of the universe. And yet, his life was far from dry or detached from history. On the contrary, it was his profound ability to bridge the sacred and the worldly that made him such a singular figure. On one occasion, it is said that he struck the future Emperor Xuanzong of Tang squarely across the face, an act of startling defiance, meant to teach the young ruler about compassion and humility. In any culture, a monk daring to raise his hand to a future sovereign is a rare and audacious thing. It revealed that Huangbo was not merely a spiritual recluse, but a man with a vision that defied the limitations of his era. When Xuanzong eventually ascended the throne, he did not retaliate. Instead, he bestowed upon Huangbo a Dharma title, the Rude Monk, a humorous yet deeply respectful moniker. The emperor himself ordered that all of Huangbo's teachings be transcribed, among them a collection of 14 prophetic poems. Each verse was like a shard of history, written in a rich classical language filled with symbolism, a kind of cryptic code whose true meaning would only be uncovered by future generations. No one could have foreseen that 800 years later, these seemingly innocuous verses would begin to unfold with chilling accuracy. From the fall of the Ming Dynasty to the rise of the Qing, from bloody civil unrest to the golden age of Kangxi, Yongjing, and Qianlong, every major event in the long arc of Chinese history appeared to be foretold in Huangbo's verses, as if he had held time itself in his hands. But what has left modern scholars truly astonished is a detail hidden within the final 2 poems, an explicit reference to the year 2025. Why would a Zen master from over a millennium ago leave behind a prophetic trace of a year far beyond his own time? And more intriguingly, why does this same year appear repeatedly in the visions of mystics and prophets from entirely different corners of the world, separated by centuries, culture, and geography with no connection between them? Let us now move on to the next part to explore how Zen master Huangbo came to foresee the future. In the sweeping arc of ancient Chinese history, the Ming Dynasty is often remembered as one of the last great empires of Han Chinese rule. With achievements spanning culture, science, and diplomacy, the Ming once stood as a brilliant pinnacle of Eastern civilization. And yet, like all glory in history, that brilliance would eventually fade. What's truly astonishing is that the downfall of this mighty dynasty may have been foretold 8 centuries earlier, in the very first prophetic poem left behind by Zen master Huangbo. In that poem, Huangbo referenced the disruption of the sun and moon, two celestial symbols that, by no coincidence, directly mirrored the official emblem of the Ming dynasty itself. The image of a chaotic sun and moon served as a powerful metaphor for a kingdom in decline. And indeed, as the Ming entered its final years, that decline became evident on every level. Natural disasters struck in relentless succession. Famine spread across the land, corruption festered within the court, and violent uprisings erupted with growing ferocity. The people lost faith in their rulers. Farmers rose up in revolt. Factions within the government turned on each other, clawing for what power remained. To the north, the Manchu forces loomed like a black storm gathering at the borders. To the south, Li Zicheng, a former soldier turned revolutionary, marched his peasant army toward Beijing, determined to seize the throne. And then, the inevitable happened. In 1644, Li Zicheng's forces breached the capital. In that haunting moment of history, Emperor Chongzhen, the last ruler of the Ming dynasty, took his own life beneath an ancient tree, as if offering one final act of penance to the ancestors he had failed. What defies explanation is that Huangbo's poem had seemingly predicted this exact fate. Not just the fall itself, but the imagery, the moment, and the tone of irreversible tragedy. And yet the prophecy didn't end there. Beneath the sorrow of collapse, Huangbo hinted at something greater, a motion larger than any one emperor or empire. For as one age comes to its end, another inevitably begins. And like darkness before the dawn, the fall of the Ming marked not just an ending, but a forewarning of what was to come. What rose from its ashes was the Qing dynasty, ushering in a fundamental shift in the power, culture, and even destiny of China itself. But what continues to unnerve scholars today is the uncanny fact that all of it, the chaos, the death, the regime change, was written plainly in that very first poem, hundreds of years before any of it came to pass. After the fall of the Ming dynasty, China entered a new chapter under the Qing, an empire founded by warriors from the northern frontier. At first, many dismissed the Qing as a patchwork regime, lacking the grandeur and refinement of the golden age that had come before. But then, a young emperor emerged, one who would silence an entire court and go on to be remembered as one of the most brilliant sovereigns in the history of the East. His name was Kangxi. He ascended the throne at the age of just 8 and would become the beating heart of an empire for more than 6 decades. And what seems almost beyond belief is that the fate of this extraordinary ruler had already been foretold in the second prophetic poem of Zen master Huangbo, written centuries before Kangxi was even born. Contrary to what some might assume, Kangxi was not raised in luxury or indulgence. Instead, he came of age in a court rife with manipulation and power struggles. At the center of this turmoil was Oboi, one of the 4 regents entrusted by the previous emperor to oversee the realm during the boy's youth. But Oboi had consolidated power for himself, becoming the de facto ruler of the empire. Though Kangxi held the title of emperor, it was Oboi who pulled the strings. What no one expected, however, was that the boy emperor would one day turn the tables with his own hands. In 1669, at the age of just 16, Kangxi orchestrated a masterstroke. He invited Oboi to the palace under the pretense of sharing tea, all while setting the stage for a trap that had been carefully prepared in secret. As Oboi raised his cup, he accidentally dropped it, an act that, in the strict etiquette of the time, was considered a grave insult to the emperor. Seizing the moment, Kangxi gave the signal, and guards rushed in to arrest the once untouchable regent on the spot. In a single calculated move, a teenager had toppled the most powerful figure in the court. What astonished scholars even more was not merely the prophecy of Kangxi's rise or his daring act of reclaiming power, but something far more precise. Huangbo's poem had also predicted the exact length of his reign. Within the second verse, there is a line referencing 61 years of rule, and it was indeed 61 years that Kangxi held the imperial throne. He would go on to become one of the longest reigning emperors in Chinese history, his rule marking an era of strength, stability, and cultural flourishing, exactly as the poem had foretold. In the 4th prophetic poem of Zen master Huangbo, he foretold the reign of Emperor Qianlong, who would lift China to the zenith of its imperial grandeur, only to set it on a path of decline that followed swiftly behind the brilliance. Qianlong ascended the throne in 1735, inheriting not only the crown, but also a deeply entrenched foundation of political strength and military power. He quickly consolidated authority, expanded the empire's borders, and led the Qing dynasty to what many consider the absolute pinnacle of power in Chinese imperial history. Under his reign, China controlled vast territories, exerted influence over neighboring nations, and its citizens experienced a rare and celebrated era of prosperity. And just as the fourth prophetic poem had stated, Huangbo predicted that Qianlong would reign for 60 years. At first, many believed this forecast to be incorrect. Qianlong himself had declared that he would not rule longer than 60 years as a gesture of respect, refusing to outshine the 61-year reign of his grandfather, Emperor Kangxi. True to his word, in 1795, at the age of 85, Qianlong abdicated and passed the throne to his son, Yongyan, who would become Emperor Jia. But the truth was more complicated. Although he stepped down in name, Qianlong continued to wield actual power behind the scenes, ruling as Taishang Huang, or retired emperor, for another 4 years until his death in 1799. By the time he relinquished the throne, the empire was already entering a period of decline. Though Qianlong had once been a model sovereign, his later years were marked by superstition and a dangerous tolerance for corruption. The once vibrant court became bloated and sluggish, and the brilliance of its peak was steadily dimmed by the growing shadow of collapse. Indeed, after Qianlong's death, China faced mounting crises, from internal rebellions and economic weakening to increasing pressure from the industrialized powers of the West. And as uncanny as it may seem, all of this had already been written, quietly, poetically, and centuries ahead of its time, in the prophetic verse of Master Huangbo. After the radiant glory of the Qianlong era, the history of China turned a new page, one that foreshadowed the coming of crisis and calamity. And as if echoing a warning across centuries, the fifth prophetic poem of Zen master Huangbo marked the beginning of this downward spiral with the image of a heavy red dragon. According to the Chinese calendar, the year 1796 symbolizes the red dragon, coinciding with the ascension of Emperor Jia. This was the era Huangbo foretold as the beginning of China's modern Dark Age. And indeed, so it was. In reality, the Jia reign was the period when the Qing dynasty first began facing severe systemic breakdowns. The most prominent crisis was the White Lotus Rebellion, a massive uprising fueled by a religious folk movement that swept across large regions and lasted nearly a decade. Corruption spread unchecked, and the bureaucratic system grew increasingly feeble. Jia ruled for 25 years before succumbing to illness in 1820. Meanwhile, Britain had already emerged from its first industrial revolution, while China remained insular, clinging to its age-old policies of trade exclusion and cultural superiority. This overconfidence would open the door to what became one of the greatest tragedies in modern Chinese history. The British, driven by expanding consumer demand and hungry for trade, orchestrated what could only be described as a soft invasion, smuggling opium into China under the guise of commerce. As millions of Chinese fell into addiction, social order began to disintegrate. In 1839, faced with a national emergency, Emperor Daoguang dispatched Lin Zexu to Guangzhou to end the opium trade. In a dramatic act of defiance, Lin destroyed over 20,000 chests of opium right in the public square. This triggered the First Opium War with Britain. In 1840, war broke out, and with its overwhelming military superiority, Britain quickly defeated China. Huangbo's verses, written in the 9th century, seem to foresee not just the fate of individuals, but the trajectory of an entire civilization. From the first cracks seen in the Jia era to the unraveling of imperial strength under Daoguang, the poem resounds like a warning bell, declaring that when an empire refuses to evolve, the world will evolve without it. Across many of Zen master Huangbo's prophetic poems, one cannot help but notice a pattern of astonishing accuracy. Out of the 14 total poems, 12 have already come true, leaving only 2 shrouded in uncertainty. And as fate would have it, the 13th poem contains a reference to the year 2025, a year which, if the prophecy proves correct, could alter the global order in ways beyond imagination. In that poem, Huangbo does not mention any emperor. He names no dynasty. Instead, he writes as if speaking directly to humanity itself. The content of the poem reads, "In the year of the rat, the world reels from plague. The West shall again witness the rise of one from the South. By the year of the snake, all shall return to the center." According to the traditional Asian calendar, the year of the rat corresponds to 2020, and the year of the snake to 2025. But what truly chills the spine is not just the mention of these years. It is the way modern history has begun to unfold almost exactly as foretold. In 2020, the world was gripped by an unprecedented pandemic. Life froze. Cities stood silent, like scenes from wartime. The global economy faltered. Grief seeped into every household, and many began to speak of Huangbo's prophecy. Now, as we step into 2025 itself, the question lingers: what comes next? The West shall witness a force rising from the South. This line invites many interpretations. Perhaps it hints at geopolitical shifts, nations from the global South rising in influence. Perhaps it alludes to societal upheavals, as forgotten communities reclaim their voice. Or perhaps it speaks of spiritual and cultural transformations, where new currents of thought begin to challenge the long-established pillars of Western democracy, signs that the world is no longer as it once was, and that the center of human history may be shifting. Those familiar with Chinese history know that China has long considered itself the Middle Kingdom, the axis around which all things in the universe revolve. So when Huangbo's prophecy speaks of all returning to the center, could he be implying that China will reassert itself as the dominant global power? Or does this foreshadow an even graver possibility, a third world war, as mentioned in other prophetic accounts, with China emerging victorious? We have already witnessed the collapse of the Soviet Union, the trauma of September 11th, the 2008 financial crisis, and the 2020 pandemic. History has never shied away from turning sharp corners, but 2025 might be unlike anything we've seen before. It may mark a great turning point in human civilization. It may be a new beginning or a final end, but whatever comes, it is our choices, how we live, what we believe, and how we act, that will carry us through the storm. If the world truly is changing, then let us be the ones who change it for the better. If the fate of humanity truly lies in our hands, let us not let it slip away unnoticed. Because as Master Huangbo wrote in his final poem, what comes next must be asked of those who come after. In other words, no matter how events unfold, it is always the hands of future generations that hold the power to shape a brighter world. If today's story made you pause, even just for a moment, to reflect on the ancient prophecies whispered across the centuries, then share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell. I'll see you in the next story.